Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. The playoffs are here for baseball. I mean, we made it. It's time. It's exciting. The Red Sox are definitely continuing to surprise all of us. We're going to get into all of that today, but I hope everyone's having a great week. Tomorrow's Friday. It's sunny outside, at least here today. So a lot of optimism and excitement right now, and just reasons to be in a good mood, especially if you're a Red Sox fan. So with that, I'd like to introduce my guest that I have with me this week. Super knowledgeable about baseball and content. It's involved with writing for a couple different websites, baseball related sites, and has his own Red Sox podcast. So Brendan Campbell, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on today, Gabby.
Yeah, thank you for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. So before we kind of dive into everything that's going on in the baseball world right now, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you got involved in sports and working in baseball, and just your podcast and when that started?
So starting off the podcast, that started slightly after the new year. It was just something I thought I could add to my own blog, which I started 4 years ago. So I wouldn't say I work in baseball or sports per se. It's just something I do. It started off as a hobby, but I've gotten more passionate about it as the years have gone on.
That's awesome. Yeah, you definitely do a really good job with covering baseball content too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and you started your podcast pretty shortly after I did, actually, because I started this show in December, so not that much after that.
Interesting timing, yeah.
Yeah, really. And that's yeah, that's really cool. I think podcasting is super fun, and it allows you to talk to some awesome people and just have really good conversations and talk about the teams that we love, right?
Oh yeah, I think it's good for networking stuff like that, like you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is. Just being able to meet so many people. But yeah, I'm excited to have you on today. I think this is going to be a great episode. And so I want to start off with, wow, like what a roller coaster of a season this really was for the Red Sox. I think there was a lot of frustration going on down the stretch, especially the last week of the season when, they had come off getting swept by the Yankees, and then they lose 2 of 3 to the Orioles, and things were really starting to not look that good because it didn't seem like they were really clicking and they weren't really playing up to their full potential. And so going into that series against the Nationals, they put a lot of pressure on themselves because in order to stay safe in terms of a playoff spot, they pretty much had no choice but to sweep Washington. And so being in that situation was kind of unfortunate, but that's what they did. And, for me, it was really exciting to watch Rafael Devers hit that 2-run homer in the ninth in that last game against the Nationals to seal their playoff spot, essentially. And that was a really cool moment. I mean, for me as a fan, and I'm sure for you too. And so it just kind of solidified everything that they had done all season.
Yeah, like Cora said after the game, like it was funny. After the season finale, he said that was the toughest game he had to manage because they didn't know if they were playing for 163 or a wild card spot. And then after the game on Tuesday, he also said that was the toughest game he had to manage because it was win or go home. So yeah, that was last few weeks of Red Sox baseball have been pretty intense, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even after that game on Sunday, in my head, after Toronto's game ended, I said, I want absolutely nothing to do with the Blue Jays at all. That team scares me. They have a really good lineup, and it would have terrified me to have to play a game 163 against them just to get a wild card spot. I'm not sure about you, but they scared me a lot more than the Yankees did.
Yeah, they have a potent lineup, 1 through 9. Guys like Vlad Jr., Bo Bichette, Randall Grichuk, Teoscar Hernandez, just a power threat all the way through. So, I mean, the Yankees have a formidable lineup too, but as we saw on Tuesday, not a lot of their guys showed up. So,
Yeah, the thing with Toronto is, and they have a few decent pitchers around them too. If they got a couple more solid starters, they're going to be super good. And I mean, that's a team that really fought to the end for a spot. And that was a team that before the season started, I had kind of thought had a chance of winning the division. They were actually the team that I envisioned winning the division because I did not expect the Rays to win 100 games and win the division. And the Yankees I knew would be up there, but I really thought that Toronto had a chance. And I think if they had been healthy all season, they definitely had a chance. But it came down to the last day. And once the result of their game was final, I looked at my friend and I was like, wow, I bet every single person on the Blue Jays right now is like on the edge of their seat in that locker room watching how this Red Sox game ends.
Yeah, they were showing like Vlad Jr. was in the Blue Jays dugout watching the Red Sox game on the Rogers Center Jumbotron. So that was pretty interesting to see from that perspective, I guess.
Oh, really? I didn't see that. But yeah, it's probably because they knew that their season was dependent on the Red Sox at that point, and the Red Sox were determining their fate at that point. So I do feel badly for them in a way because they really, really fought hard to the end and they crushed the Orioles in that last game and were really making a noise and showing that they wanted their season to be extended. But they're going to be a really good team for years to come. I mean, there's a lot of young talent in that lineup. And I do think that they make a couple pitching moves in the offseason. And so I think they're going to be a problem next year. And I think the Red Sox, Yankees, and Rays are all going to have trouble with them going forward.
Yeah, they need to reinforce their bullpen, right? Like that. I think that was
Yeah.
the biggest thing that dragged them down this year. Like they go out and trade for a guy like Brad Hand, all-star closer, only to DFA him a few weeks later because it just didn't work out. So I think they need to reinforce their bullpen this offseason.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's definitely their biggest weakness right now. But I still wanted absolutely nothing to do with that lineup in a one-game playoff because the Red Sox, I mean, they won the season series against Toronto this year, but some of the later games they really struggled against them when the Blue Jays really started to get hot and turn it on. And they played well against the Yankees this year as well. And even at the end, they played well against the Rays too. So I definitely think they're going to be a team to watch out for. And once again, next year, I think it's going to be a 4-team race in the AL East again.
Yeah, if George Springer can stay relatively healthy, like play 140, 150 games, I think they have a real shot to win the division, win 95 plus games.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Tampa Bay is just unbelievable. The way that they operate and the way that organization is run and the fact that they're able to see so much success. Was their first 100-win season ever for that franchise. So that's pretty impressive. And you know, looking back on Tuesday night's game against the Yankees, our offense looked really good. And I mean, they played the way that we know that they know how to play offensively, and they were making things happen. They were waiting for pitches. They weren't just trying to hit home runs all the time, which I feel like is a lot of what we had seen in the last couple weeks of the season. They were just trying to go for the long ball all the time. But in that wild card game, they were doing what they're used to doing at the plate. They were being patient, they were having discipline, and they were looking for their pitches. And as it was, they got Garrett Cole out of the game relatively early when a lot of people thought that he was going to absolutely dominate.
Yeah, it really helped that they scored first with that Bogarts 2-run home run. I think that kind of like eased the tension a little bit, kind of helped settle everyone in.
Yeah, I mean, that was a loud home run too, and that crowd was so electric to begin with. And first of all, I need to say that the crowd at Fenway was so much better than the crowd at Dodger Stadium last night, and I do not think it was close. I just think there was a much different vibe for the game at Fenway. And granted, it was Red Sox Yankees, so there was a lot more hype around that game, I think, than Dodgers Cardinals had. But still, those fans at Dodger Stadium were not nearly as loud as they were at Fenway. And at Fenway, they really, really made that atmosphere feel like playoff baseball. And I didn't get that so much from watching last night's game.
Yeah, well, the problem in Los Angeles, the game starts at 5, people
Yeah.
still working, and then obviously, like even without uh workday traffic, the traffic in LA is still terrible. So
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I was in LA for a semester when I was in college, and I went to a Dodgers game, and people don't show up until around the fourth inning anyway for their games because they just don't really care as much as they do here. They're not as passionate about it. But still, you're right. That's a good point that it's the game was starting when people's work days were ending. So a lot of people probably were late to the game, or even if they left work early, still could have gotten stuck in traffic. So on from a West Coast perspective, that's a tough time for the game to start, but they can't start it at like 10, like a usual West Coast game because it's a playoff game and they want it to be played on like a prime time type of that type of prime time here, because they want all playoff baseball games really to be at that time, so that's kind of why that was. But yeah, I definitely think the Fenway crowd was better. And I mean, you can probably speak on this too, but I think playing the game at home did make a difference, because a lot of people were saying, I don't care where the game is, anything can happen in a 1-game playoff. But I really do think that the Fenway crowd helped fuel the Red Sox in that game.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right? Like just a few days before, it felt like they would be lucky just to get into the wild card game, like regardless of where they played it after they lost that series to the Orioles. But then things kind of played in their favor where they were able to host it, which obviously proved to be a huge advantage.
Yeah, I mean, because had it been in New York, I mean, I feel like Garrett Cole would have pitched better, because he has an ERA of like 7 at Fenway this year. He just does not pitch well there. And so I think that really did help the Red Sox cause, because if he was pitching at Yankee Stadium, his performance might have been better. I think maybe the Fenway crowd rocked him a little. And I think just pitching at Fenway, he's just not comfortable there. And he hasn't been comfortable there all season, because the Red Sox have dominated him there all year. And that's why when I was looking at the numbers between the pitchers, I was like, I do feel confident in Evaldi, and I know a lot of people wanted Sale to start, but Evaldi had been pretty consistent all season and was the Red Sox most reliable starter. And outside of one start against the Yankees, he really was good against them all season. And I was looking at his numbers compared to Cole, and I really was going to give Evaldi the advantage because of the fact that Cole does not pitch well at Fenway Park.
Yeah, well, if the game was at Yankee Stadium, Cole wouldn't have to worry about anyone with the Kermit the Frog puppet taunting him. So
That
that
is
must have
true.
gotten to his head.
That is actually true. Yeah, it probably did. Yeah, which is really funny. Yeah, so that's why I'm happy it ended up being at Fenway. And that's where games at the beginning of the season come into play and are important, because a lot of times people are like, oh, these games won't matter down the stretch, but they quite literally did matter in this situation, because those earlier games are what allowed the Red Sox to be able to host the wild card game, because towards the end of the season, they kept losing games against the Yankees, and it got swept by the Yankees at Fenway. And so that, from that perspective, it wasn't great. But then you look back at the fact that they were able to string together so many wins against New York early in the season, and that helped them to be able to host that wild card game. And that's why you can look back and say, even if you don't think at the time when those games are played, because it's early, they really, really could be crucial if it comes down to the wire.
Yeah, winning the season series was huge, obviously, because they finished with the same record, but the tiebreaker goes to the Red Sox on account of the season series win. So, yeah, just being able to host that game, like I said, huge advantage.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think that makes a difference. And I think, the other thing I really liked, I mean, Evaldi was fantastic that night. I mean, he was pretty much lights out, and he gave us the exact performance that we needed from him. And, even when he gave up that home run, I was not nervous at all still, because I still felt confident. The Yankees bats looked dead all night, and Evaldi was just shutting them down and gave us exactly what we needed from him. And I know some people were nervous about it, but at the end of the day, I'm happy he was the starter for that game, because I think that he deserved it, and he proved during the season that he deserved that spot. And I think, obviously we love Sale, and he's Chris Sale, but based on what I had seen from him, especially his last few starts, I mean, he wasn't like super sharp. And I mean, against the Nationals, he did not have it. And so Evaldi, that's why I felt more confident with him, because he was coming off a really good start against Baltimore. And so I think the confidence worked more in his favor, and he had longer rest than Sale would have had if he pitched the game.
Yeah, just going off of that, I have more confidence in Evaldi just because of like the stamina he's built all season, I guess. Because Sale is coming off Tommy John. He was averaging like slightly over 5, maybe less than 5 innings per start going into the postseason. So just more confidence in Evaldi that he could give you length, which he did. You probably would have given more if it was like a regular season game, but they obviously gave him the quick hook because of the circumstances of the game.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, he's at any time Evaldi starts, really, for the most part, I feel confident. And people were giving him a hard time in that start against the Yankees, which I understand why, because people were frustrated and that was a bad series overall. But some people were acting like he was a bad pitcher. And I said, no, I mean, the guy's human. He's going to have bad nights. He's not going to have a perfect start every time. That's just not how it works. Every pitcher has bad starts. But I said, let's please not forget that he's still overall our most consistent and reliable starting pitcher right now. And I even said, I think I said even after that game, I said, despite what happened in this game, I still would feel confident with him pitching in the wild card game. And sure enough, he gave us exactly what we needed from him. And then the bullpen came in, and I was still nervous because I was like, to be honest with you, I mean, as far as Evaldi was in the game, I was not nervous because I knew how good he looked. And I said, if we can get 6 innings from him, that would be ideal. And he did go into the 6th inning, which was really good. But then as soon as the bullpen started coming into the game, I said, yeah, this lead might not be enough because we've seen worse with this bullpen. So I definitely was starting to my heart was pounding a little bit faster for those last few innings because I didn't know what we were going to get from the bullpen.
Yeah, when Brazier came in, that was a little shaky because when he gave up the hit to because Judge reached on the infield single, then Brazier gave up that the single off the monster to Stanton that probably should have scored a run but didn't. So yeah, things definitely got a little shaky once Evaldi came out of the game.
Yeah, I can't believe Judge ran on that too. I can't believe that Phil Nevin, the Yankees third base coach, sent him on that because that was so clear as day that he wasn't going to make it. And so that really, really helped us. And I do think ultimately that could have been the deciding factor because if he hadn't run on that and he stayed at third, next at bat, who knows what would have happened? Imagine if a home run is hit, then here we're looking at like a 2-run game, and then things could have been a lot different. And so I think that ended up ultimately being the deciding factor that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game after that, because the Yankees really didn't have many opportunities at all offensively after that. I think that was their biggest chance in the game offensively to try to get some runs back, and that was just a very, very crucial mistake. And I said, wow, I mean, challenging Kike's arm, I guess.
Yeah, Kike has proven to be one of the more underrated center fielders in the league in his first full
Yeah.
season playing there full time. So that relay between him and Bogarts was pretty beautiful, honestly.
Yeah.
And then with the Plucky just sitting there waiting
Yeah.
to get Judge, that was nice to see, I guess.
It was very well executed, and Kike knew exactly what to do as soon as he got that ball in his glove. He knew exactly what to do. He gunned it to Bogarts, and then they were able to get Judge out. And I started laughing because I thought it was funny because I said, wow, this is very, very funny and very beneficial for me. But I just couldn't understand why he decided to do that. But I mean, again, at the end of the day, those are the types of mistakes that you can't make in playoff games, essentially. And the Red Sox also played really good defense in that game. I was impressed because, defense has been an issue with this team overall. And so I was really happy that they were playing good defense and not making dumb defensive mistakes that have cost them a good amount of games in the last few weeks of the season, really.
Yeah, that's what Cora said after the game. Like, when we play good defense, we win. So, I mean, that's what it came down to. No costly errors, no, extra throws or anything like that. No pass balls, just a really crisply played game.
Yeah, because generally for the most part, the offense is going to score. The offense for the most part is going to do their job on the majority of games because this is a tough lineup. I mean, if people in this lineup are hitting, it's a tough lineup for opposing pitchers to face. And then with the starting rotation, I mean, overall, the starters have not been terrible. And then obviously the bullpen's been an issue. But when they play good defense, they do win a lot of games. And that was something that was frustrating because it was a lot of just dumb mistakes they had been making defensively that were just concerning to me, especially in the infield. And I said, this is costing them a lot of games because they would give up a lot of runs to that. There was even a game against the Rays recently when they literally lost a game because of defense.
Yeah, it's been a concerning concerning component of their game throughout the season. Like you said, they've lost some games on their defense, but I mean, they've also won some games as well. So it's been a wild card, like no pun intended, I guess, but it's been like a wild card all season. So we'll have to see how that plays against the Rays, who are like one of the more fundamentally sound teams in the league.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a tough series. I mean, I think after coming off of that great game against the Yankees, I feel like the Red Sox have a lot of momentum right now going into this game against the Rays, and hopefully winning that wild card game gave them some confidence because that was a huge win. And, a lot of people were counting this team out before the season started. And so just looking at where they've come and the fact that they won over 90 games while playing in the toughest division in baseball is pretty impressive. And then winning the wild card game at home in front of your home crowd, that's really special, and especially with the rivalry and everything, it's just more satisfying when it's the Yankees.
Yeah, I mean, I already think the season was a success when they clinched the wild card spot, but
Yeah.
just to eliminate the Yankees from the postseason for the second time in like 4 seasons is pretty gratifying as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you though. I did say to some of my other friends, I said, they just getting to the wild card game is a big accomplishment for this team, and like that makes the season a success to me regardless of what happens in the wild card game. Whether they win or lose that game, I still see this season as a success for this team. And so they've far exceeded expectations at this point. And now here we are, and everybody's like, we got to the ALDS, so even that's enough. But I mean, this is going to be a tough series. I mean, this is a 100-win Rays baseball team, and nobody really likes playing at their stadium because it's not a great place to play baseball. And I wonder how the crowd, I feel like, probably will end up being more Red Sox fans than Rays fans, which might help. But I mean, it's going to be a tough series. This is going to be the Rays are a very good defensive team, and like you said, a good fundamentally sound team. Like they really understand the actual fundamentals of baseball, and they play the game well, and rarely do they make messy mistakes, and that helps them win a lot of games. And so the Red Sox are going to have to be aware of that, and they're going to have to be on top of that as well and play good defense like we saw in the wild card game. I think that's going to be a huge key in this series.
Yeah, and going off of that, I think the starting pitching will be pretty key as well. You got Y. Rodriguez getting the ball for game one. He's proven to pitch well at Tropicana Field in the past. So it'll be interesting to see if that carries over tonight, because I mean, this is like his only his second career postseason start, I think it was.
Yeah, how do you feel about that overall? I mean, I'm not surprised because, he could have started Sale, but he wanted to give Sale more rest. I guess it could have been Pivetta, but Erod's more experienced than Pivetta in big games like this. And so, I feel like I feel like that's kind of what it came down to. That my guess would be that's why that decision was made to start Erod. But I mean, do you feel confident in him? Because, like you said, he has not pitched a ton of postseason starts, really. But at least it's not his first exposure, and he's going to a ballpark that he has good numbers at.
Yeah, I'd say I feel pretty confident. I mean, after all he's been through, like I know he was talking yesterday about how gratifying this is. So I think he can take that, especially like he is going to his free agent year. So I'm sure that's on the back of his mind as well. Like if you pitch well in the postseason, that's obviously going to get more eyes on you in free agency. So I think he'll take that into consideration and toss a pretty good game tonight, to put it simply.
Yeah, because I mean, the fact that this could end up being his last start in a Red Sox uniform, maybe, depending on how far they get in the postseason, he wants to, make that a good one, I feel like. And I feel like you said, his mentality is going to be, I want to go in and have a lights out performance after everything that I've been through. And, he has been through a lot the last couple seasons. And so it's great to kind of see him back and give him the chance to show in a big, important game like this, what he can really do. And I have confidence in him. And I think what we have going for us going into this game is the fact that the Rays have some young pitchers going. And so, you have to wonder if being on the big stage and the pressure of being in this type of game gets to those young pitchers a little bit and might throw them off a bit. And I think that our lineup can take advantage of that. I think that that's the type of thing that we need to know going into the game ahead of time. And I think the lineup can try to take advantage of their lack of experience and the fact that they're not really used to pitching in this type of caliber games.
Yeah, I think the first three pitchers the Rays are throwing out in this series are all rookies, so you never
Yeah.
know how
So
that will work. I'm sure they'll be pretty reliant on their bullpen, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when Tyler Glasnow went down, I really thought their season was kind of over. I thought that they were going to struggle to win games, but obviously they're making it work. They always pull these no-name random pitchers and make them into like studs over there until they trade them for somebody else. But that's just how they do things over there. But yeah, exactly. That's the point that I'm making is like when you have rookies starting in these types of games, we can take advantage of that. I mean, maybe they'll be calm and collected about it. Maybe the pressure will get to them. And if the pressure gets to them, that's an opening for the offense to really take advantage. So that's why I don't feel like it's going to be, I don't think we get swept by the Rays. I do think that we take at least one game. Winning the series would be tough, but it would be huge if we steal game one. Because if we can steal game one, then likely Chris Sale pitches tomorrow for game two.
Yeah, I think Sale's definitely starting tomorrow. But I definitely think they need to at least split these first two games to have a shot. If they
Yeah.
lose both of them, like it'll just be like a repeat of 2016 or 2017 again.
Yeah, I agree with you. They need to find a way to win one of these games at the Trop because if they go back to Fenway tied 1-1, then all of a sudden you have home field advantage for two games. You know what I mean? Where you could potentially take the series at that point. So if you go down 0-2, then that's not going to feel good at all. So I feel like winning game one in a 5-game series is so important because it sets a lot of momentum for the rest of the series. And, it's tougher than with the 7-game series because it's just a lot less games, like a 5-game series just seems like so much less. And so I feel like if they can go out there tonight, have the bats moving and keep hitting well, like they have been and like they did in the wild card game, I do think they have a chance. And I think, like you said, either win today or tomorrow, and that would be huge because then you get to go home for 2 games.
Yeah, I also think it'll be interesting to see how they come out tonight, given like the kind of game they're coming off of, where you're going from a winner go home game to all of a sudden where it's like, yeah, you don't have to win tonight. I mean, it'd be preferable for them, obviously, but you don't have to. So I wonder if like they'll have a more relaxed mindset, or they'll still come out with like the pedal to the metal kind of mentality.
I mean, I hope so. They need to come out with that mentality for every game because this is the postseason. You know what I mean? And anytime you can win a game, you want to win that game. So I hope they don't come out relaxed. You could tell that they had that fire and that energy in the wild card game. And I don't know how you feel, but to me, it seemed blatantly obvious that the Red Sox wanted it more than the Yankees. They came out with more passion and more fire in that game. And that was the type of energy that I feel like we had been missing for a while. That was the type of energy from this offense that we had been used to seeing all season that we missed the last few weeks of the season, And so it was great to see them come out with that type of energy for that game. And so they need to come out with that energy again because they're like we are in the postseason, we deserve to be here, and we can win some of these games.
So it kind of sounds like you're saying when Xander Bogaerts goes, the rest of the offense goes, because he was obviously in a slump like most of September, at least the latter half. But then he starts off Tuesday night with a 2-run home run, kind of carries them to a win. So it sounds like that's what you're saying.
I do kind of in a way feel that way though, because it's when him or JD are in a major slump or both of them, it just seems like the offense overall struggles. I just feel like when Bogarts is hitting, he contributes so much to this offense. And I feel like that just shows the importance of somebody like him in the Red Sox offense right now.
Yeah. Seeing JD added to the roster, obviously a good sign. I don't know if he'll be playing tonight, but just to have him there, like
Yeah.
that's very encouraging to me. Do you actually want to talk about the roster a little bit? Because there were some interesting decisions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what are your thoughts on it for sure? Because I mean, I was looking at when Cora released the postseason roster originally, he had said there might be some key names left off of it, but it was a little weird to me in some ways.
Well, the wild card game, you're just going for like the 1 game kill. So like you're not gonna have Chris Sale because he just pitched on Sunday. But
Exactly, which makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, but for this ALDS roster, I would say there were some interesting decisions like leaving Matt Barnes off per se.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wondered that myself too, because I said, well, so are you just relying on hoping somebody else can close games? I mean, maybe he just doesn't. I mean, is it that he doesn't trust Barnes enough? Or I mean, I don't. I mean, what we've seen from Barnes this year has kind of been all over the place. I mean, he had an inconsistent season overall this year. And whether I trust him to close out a game right now, if they have a 1-run lead and they need somebody to come in the bottom of the ninth, I don't know that I would trust Barnes right now in that position.
Yeah, I think Barnes lost his closer role a while ago. I mean, we saw on Tuesday they had Garrett Whitlock close
I
things
liked
out.
that. Yeah, I liked that move.
And I think Cora said yesterday that they'll just like be mixing and matching in those situations moving forward. So maybe you have like Adam Ottavino or Hansel Robles, depending on the matchups. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Matt Barnes that I will say, and one of the reasons why I was kind of bummed that they left him off is because of his presence, like his veteran leadership presence being there, and the fact that he's been with this team and has a World Series ring with this team, and so I feel like having him there present, I thought maybe would be beneficial for the team from a motivation type standpoint, and having that leadership there, you know what I mean? And so that in a way was the biggest reason why I was surprised he was left off, more so than his actual pitching itself.
Yeah, like you said, he has a veteran presence. He's one of the leaders of the bullpen. But it seems they were more looking at on the field that rather than the
Yeah.
intangibles, I guess.
Exactly, which makes sense because you have to win these games. And I mean, they have other veterans on the team like Xander Bogaerts, who's the captain and is a great leader for this team. You know what I mean? So you'll have people like that that can really rally the team and keep them motivated throughout the postseason. But yeah, that was definitely probably the most surprising move in terms of the roster that I'd say, and the most notable one I'd say. Hansel Robles, I do like what I've seen from him though lately, and so I am happy that he's on it because I think he's been pitching really well down the stretch. Overall, I think lately he's at the point now where in a lot of situations I would be able to trust him to come into games.
Yeah, he can be kind of. It's like the Hansel Robles experience, Like he can be kind of wild from time to time, but he's been pretty lights out over the final few weeks. So yeah, I trust him entirely at the moment.
Yeah, I think I like what I've seen from him. Garrett Richards, though, I mean, when he first went into the bullpen, he was fantastic. I mean, like pretty much lights out. And we were like, this is what we wanted from Garrett Richards out of the bullpen, too. And this is what we intended. But lately, he's been a little scary. I mean, he gave up 3 runs to the Nationals in that one inning. And I thought at that point that they were going to lose that game because I was like, this just feels like the type of game where, they haven't really been hitting that much. And they might lose this game. And I in my head was running through like, okay, it looks like we're playing a game 163 against Toronto when Garrett Richards blew that. But then they started chipping away. They scored that second run, and then I was like, all right, here we go. Like maybe there's a chance still. Like they're only within 3 runs now. Like they could come back. And then sure enough, that's what happened. But the Garrett Richards is definitely still a concern to me.
Yeah, it's been a weird year for him. I mean, he never could really figure out in the starting rotation, especially after the sticky stuff crackdown. Then he moved into the bullpen where he looked like an elite reliever for a little while. But then, like you said, his final few appearances were pretty subpar. So I don't know how much trust you can have in him moving forward. I mean, if you're using him as a reliever, like I guess it's kind of confusing to me why you have Barnes out but him in, and then the same goes with Martin Perez as well.
Yeah, Martin Perez is the same way. I mean, he's had issues all season though. I mean, he's never really been reliable in any position he's in because it really seems like he can't pitch out of the rotation or the bullpen. So that one's another big concern for me. But I do think Cora, he showed that in the wild card game too. I think he knows kind of how to utilize players when a lot of the time in must win games like that. And he made all the right moves in terms of his pitching in that wild card game. He stuck in the pitchers that he felt were most reliable, that he felt he could really trust after Eovaldi was pulled. And so I think I trust Cora's decision making more now because he is a good playoff manager. And so I think I trust a lot of his decisions, and I think he's going to do what he feels is best for the team, and it's going to be situation based.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Perez is pretty low on the bullpen rung, like low leverage. Like I'm not
if they're winning a game by like a lot, and it's one of those games where it's a blowout, maybe against the Rays, then maybe bring in Perez, but not in a high leverage situation.
Yeah, exactly.
But somebody like Sawamura, I mean, how do you feel about him? Because he's kind of been a little rocky himself too.
Yeah, like his numbers on the surface looks good, but once you like dig in a little, you realize he deals with gives up a lot of base runners. He's been working in a lot of low leverage situations lately. I mean, he was left off the wild card roster, so that one didn't surprise me at all, really.
Yeah, me either. No, I was not surprised at all by that one because he hasn't really been reliable enough as it is. I mean, he did come in, and I will give him this, that he came in that game against the Nationals and got that key double play, which I was freaking out because my heart was kind of pounding because I said, I don't know if I really want to see Sawamura coming on right now, but that was clutch. And we needed that. That was huge. That situation could have been a lot worse than it was. And so that ultimately is what allowed them to come back and win the game. So I do like to thank him for that moment. But yeah, I was not at all surprised he wasn't on the wild card game roster either. But you have to wonder like how these people are going to be utilized. I mean, I do trust Whitlock overall. And in a way, I was nervous a little bit about him coming in the ninth inning against the Yankees. They had a big enough lead where I was like, it's he has something to work with here. Like it's not like they're up by 1 run. He has some breathing room here. So that I liked, but I was like, this is the first game of this caliber that we're seeing Garrett Whitlock in too. So who knows how that's going to go, you know what I mean? And it's always risky when you have players like that because you don't know how they're going to react to the pressure and everything. But, overall he looks pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean,
with Whitlock, there was
home run to Stanton, but other than that, he was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there were some loud outs too, but
Oh yeah,
there was never really a point where you had to get the bullpen going after you put him in. So
yeah, I mean, they had enough of a lead where I think it was fine, and I think it was good to be able to give him that exposure too, because now he has that postseason exposure for that game. So now if he has to be utilized in this series, he's a little more equipped. I feel like now that he got his foot in the water there. So I'm happy that Cora made that move. Actually,
yeah, it was also good story wise for him to end the Yankees season. That was fun to write about the other day.
Yeah, like of all people you wrote it in an article for one of your sites. Yeah, I mean, just of all people, you know what I mean? One of my friends texted me and said, I kind of want Ottavino to pitch now and end the Yankee season just so everything could come full circle. But it's the same situation with Whitlock. And so it's kind of awesome that Whitlock of all people was the one that got to end their season.
Yeah, I mean, for the Yankees and I know hindsight's 2020, but for them not to even just give him a 40-man roster spot last year is an all-time blunder. That's what it's looking like after one season anyway.
Yeah, and obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, hopefully he stays healthy, but do you think down the road they would end up making him a starter?
Oh yeah, I think that could happen as soon as spring training next year, depending on how the rest of the offseason plays out.
Yeah, I mean, he's a type of guy that can give you a few innings. I mean, we've seen him do it before. I don't want them to force it necessarily, but if they can make him a starter, that could be a really, really dangerous weapon to have in that rotation, I feel like.
But there's also value in his role now where you can deploy him whenever. If you need 2 innings here, 1 inning there, if you need a save or a lockdown 8th inning. I mean, he's pretty versatile in that regard. And the Red Sox clearly value versatility. So
yeah, that is a very, very good point. And I mean, that's why he's somebody that's really good to have here because I feel like there's a few different ways that they can utilize him. And I think that's going to be really important to see how they do utilize him because if they can make him a starter, then this rotation already has gotten better. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, you have players like Tanner Houck who is good when he's out there, but longevity is still an issue for him. He struggles with the third time through the order with a lot of teams. And that just seems to be the pattern with him. He'll give you a solid few innings, but then he'll start to struggle. So I think it's more of a longevity issue with him still right now.
Yeah, I think Houck projects as a reliever still. I mean, he's going to be used like that in the playoffs regardless, but I think down the line, at least at the moment, he's a reliever.
Yeah, I mean, some people think that he should still be a starter, but I think his stuff would be really, really scary just being a permanent bullpen piece because he's somebody that you can bring in for a couple innings after your starter gets taken out of the game and just maybe, him pitch a couple innings, and then it can be your bridge to somebody like, like a Garrett Whitlock or Adam Ottavino or somebody like that. So that's why I feel like with Tanner Houck, he might, like you said, just be best suited to stay in the bullpen after this postseason, depending on how that goes. Just because I feel like I kind of disagree with a lot of people who say that he should still have a starting spot, because I just feel like based on where he's at, he could be a really, really dangerous and valuable weapon out of the bullpen permanently. You know what I mean? Because if he's coming into a game, he can give you a few innings and he has good enough stuff where he can, pitch really well and string together some scoreless innings for you. So I think that he could be really, really valuable out of this bullpen just going forward.
Yeah, and he's still working on that third pitch, right? Like he's still trying to develop a splitter to use normally. So I think until that happens, maybe he's best suited for the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, his slider is so good, though. His slider I could watch like all day, every day, because it's so dominant and so good and just extremely hard to hit.
Yeah, I mean, when they pointed out last year after he made his debut that he looks like a right-handed Chris Sale, that kind of blew me away. Like I guess I was kind of surprised. Like I didn't realize that myself.
Yeah, when people made that comparison, but it's actually not. It's not inaccurate. You know what I mean?
No, if
Like,
you
it
mirror the
definitely is a good
video, it's like
comparison.
identical.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, I mean, I wouldn't have realized that, I don't think, unless somebody actually said it. But when they did say it, I was like, wow, you're actually right. That's such a good comparison. So yeah, I really like Houck, but more as a bullpen piece. But I mean, Ottavino's another one. I mean, he kind of concerns me a little bit too, because he's the type of pitcher that you don't know which Ottavino you're going to get. Are you going to get the really dominant Ottavino that shuts down a team? Or are you going to get the Ottavino that's shaky and makes things a little interesting and slightly scary? Because he still has a problem with walks. He's had a problem with walks all season.
Yeah, and then combine that with the recent home run issues, like in that national series, and he becomes like kind of tough guy to trust if you only have like a 1 or 2 run lead, because then if you walk someone like a leadoff walk, that puts you in danger right away.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm concerned, because I hate leadoff walks so much, because I feel like more often than not they come back to bite you, and it's happened so many times in his situation too, where he walks the leadoff hitter and it comes back to bite him in some way, shape, or form, and that's what makes me concerned about him. I mean, he's experienced, obviously, but he definitely concerns me in some ways, and I think that's going to be another one that we have to keep an eye on. And that's going to be, I think, a game time decision for Alex Cora, like an in-game decision. Do we put him in a high leverage situation or not?
Yeah, I think of all the guys out there, I think Whitlock's obviously the most like the high leverage guy.
Yeah.
I think Brazier might be up there too, and Robles. But besides that, I don't know. It's kind of like a mixed bag, I guess.
Brazier has been really good lately. He's pitched very, very good. And that's why, when he came back, at first I was a little concerned because he was not pitching that well at first, but he's pitched so well down the stretch. And that's been super helpful for this team, because that's somebody that we really needed, somebody like that. And so I think, he's the type of guy that at the moment I trust, but I use the word trust very, very lightly, because things change very quickly when it comes to this bullpen. So that's why I use the word trust lightly. But yeah, Hansel Robles, I think, has proven lately that he's been a guy that you can go to in high leverage situations, and he'll do his best to pitch well and get you out of it. And I think that obviously Whitlock and I think overall, I mean, Austin Davis also has had his struggles. I mean, he's been very off and on as well. So that's why he's another pitcher that I'm sitting here like, yeah, I don't know if I'd fully trust him or not either.
Yeah, and on top of that, you got to remember the rover too. Now that the playoffs are here, like they'll be like Pivetta, I think will be the main star they use as a reliever, but I think Erod too will be used. And then if they advance further, obviously Sale and Eovaldi will have to be considered as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point. And that's something that I feel like isn't being brought up enough, that they have starters that they can use out of the bullpen. Because, I mean, Erod's obviously starting tonight, but when he's not starting, he could be a really good weapon for like a couple innings once you have to pull the starter type thing, or even Eovaldi out of the bullpen. I mean, that gives you so many more options. I mean, I think Pivetta, yeah, I think you're right. I think Pivetta is going to be the main starter that's used out of the bullpen, because I don't really see him starting for a bit. Because I think you start Sale tomorrow, and then Evaldi can start again on Sunday for game 3 because he will have had enough rest at that point. So I feel like that's what Cora would do, and so in between all of that, Pavetta could really be that go-to next guy after the starter gets pulled. If you want to get 2 or 3 innings out of somebody, you can go to Pavetta, hope that you can get maybe a solid 2 or 3 innings from him, and then go to whoever you want to close the game.
Right. And with you saying that, it'll be interesting to see. Like, this is the first time the Red Sox have been in the postseason without a real set closer, because from like 16 to 18, they had
That's
Craig Kimbrell. Obviously, Kimbrell wasn't really himself in 18, but still, you had like that 9th inning guy. Like, at least in the beginning, you felt kind of comfortable with going to. I mean, it changed in the end, obviously, because Chris Sale closed out the World Series. But yeah, the whole mixing and matching should be interesting to see how Cora handles that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's also another valid point. I mean, not having a real closer has scared me all season, but now it's even scarier because now this is the playoffs, and and they rolled with that strategy, so now we have to kind of roll with that as well. But yeah, I mean, Kimbrel gave me near heart attacks in multiple games in the 2018 playoffs, against the Yankees and against the Astros. That was super scary. So, but I mean, at least he was a real closer, you know what I mean? And so now it's Cora needs to. I don't think we're going to see the same person closing the games every time. I think it's going to be circumstantial, like I mentioned before. I think it's going to be dependent on, that specific game, maybe who's been used in other games and who hasn't, and like who's pitching well and who's not. So I think there's a possibility that we don't see the same person closing every game. I think it's going to just come down to, what's going on in that game and who's maybe been utilized more and who needs more rest and who is ready to go at that time. So I think there's a lot that Cora can do with the bullpen. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does. But in terms of the managing portion, I trust Alex Cora's decision making, especially in playoff games. I mean, he definitely showed in that wild card game that he was making the right moves when it came to his pitching staff in the game.
Man, on the flip side of that, what do you think about Jarren Duran being left off in favor of Danny Santana? I think that was basically the switch.
Yeah, I think Jarren Duran, when they called him up, I don't really think he was ready. I think that he still needed some more time. Need to take some more at bats in AAA. And I think, obviously he has glimpses of stuff that's really, really good, but we could have really used his speed in the postseason. I feel like if anything, even if he wasn't, starting in the starting lineup for a lot of the games, I do think with his speed, he's somebody that we could have really benefited from, especially in like a pinch running type of situation, because nobody on the team is as fast as him. So I do think there were things that he could have brought to the table.
Yeah, but I think like what I was reading on Twitter it came down to defensive versatility. So whereas you can have Santana play like first base, second base, where Duran's just mostly limited to the outfield.
Right, which does make sense because Danny Santana is more of a utility type player like Kike, where you can kind of stick him in a few different positions. You know what I mean? And he'll do it. And I mean, he's not great at the plate, but I mean, that we have a lot of hitters that are solid at the plate. So it seems like he was prioritizing defense more in the fielding aspect of it, which I do think is smart. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of what they need. Because I still don't trust Schwarber at first base. And so you need somebody that you can kind of flip around and can be able to play a few different positions. So that way you can alternate guys out and give them some rest. And Santana can kind of play anywhere.
And he's a switch hitter too, so I'm sure that played a role.
Yeah, and that does make sense to me at the end of the day, because you need to make decisions that are based on what's going to be best overall for your team in a playoff series. And if you need somebody like that you can throw into a lot of different positions in the field, ultimately, like, that's good to have somebody like that on that roster, because it's not like you can only have Kike for that. And, so I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly how he is utilized, but it's good to have somebody like that on the roster that, can pretty much do anything.
Well, one of the luxuries of like having JD out of the wild card game is you could just stick Schwarber at DH, but I mean, assuming JD plays tonight, you have to stick Schwarber either at first base or in left field probably. So, like you said, his defense is a bit of a concern. So, I mean, that was one of the nice things about the wild card game, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, I mean, JD, obviously it's really good to have him back on the roster. But it is going to be interesting to see what happens, especially, you've got to wonder what happens with JD's opt out and everything like that, and if they let him walk or not. And a lot of people, I'm kind of on the we should let him walk and spend that money to re-sign Schwarber, but some people disagree with me on that. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I think he has the choice to opt in or out, so it's going to be up to him, really. So with the
Yeah.
whole CBA negotiation stuff coming up, maybe he just decides to opt in and take the security in the final year of his deal. Because, I mean, he is 34. He
Yeah.
had a productive season, but it wasn't like what you expected from him before last year. I mean, it was a nice bounce back year, but I think he
Yeah. I mean,
stays.
it's one of those situations where what team is going to offer him like big money at this point in his career, really? You know
Right.
what I mean? And he probably knows that. So I feel like at the end of the day, like he's going to end up opting in and just staying. But I mean, I'd love for Schwarber to be re-signed. That's the thing. I really like him. I think that he's been such a big asset to this offense. And so I would hate to see him go.
Yeah, it was hard to believe he was non-tendered by another team like last December, but yeah,
Oh, I know.
he's gonna make a lot of money this winter. Hopefully, it's with the Red Sox, like you said.
I know whoever decides to sign him is going to offer him big money, and I'm really hoping that it's us because we could really use somebody like that to stay here. But I mean, Bobby Dahlbeck has been his second half has been phenomenal. His second half of the season at the plate has been phenomenal, and I think there's still obviously things he needs to work on, especially defensively. But again, he's young, and so if he can really develop, I think he could be really, really good at first base as well, just going forward.
Yeah, I think you have to consider Tristan Cassis at first base as well because he's on the come up. Like I tweeted a few weeks ago, like I think he's going to be like one of the storylines of spring trading next year, which is
Yeah,
obviously a long ways away. A lot can happen, but I think Cassis is the future at first base if we're talking about that position.
yeah, because you have to wonder, when he's even going to be ready to come up, and that could be soon. I mean, we don't know for sure, obviously, because there's still a ways to go. But when he comes up, you do have to wonder if they just trade Bobby because they don't see him as part of the future. You know what I mean? Because they have Casas coming up, who they feel is the future, and then they just try to trade Bobby somewhere else.
Yeah, the same goes with Duran too, because if you bring back Schwarber, that creates like more of a logjam in the outfield. Because I mean, you're assuming they're going to bring back Renfro. Kike has another year left on his deal, and then you probably have Schwarber and left primarily, maybe. So I mean, there'll be a lot of interesting decisions to make.
Yeah, I love Hunter Renfro, by the way. I mean, he was probably one of the most underrated offseason signings in all of baseball. I mean, I was excited about it, but I don't think anybody knew that this was the guy we were going to get. I mean, he's been phenomenal on both sides of the ball, defensively and at the plate. He's just contributed a lot to this team. And so I'm really, really happy he's here. I think he fits in really well here. I think Fenway is a great ballpark for him. And so I'm really happy he's here. But you're right, there's going to be a lot of decisions to make. And I think they'll be able to see, like, based on how they do this off season, I think they'll be able to see a lot of what they want the direction of this team to be going forward, because they've already exceeded expectations in 2021. Imagine how good they're going to be in 2022, 2023. And there's a lot more in the farm system now, thanks to Heim Bloom, that they can work with and players that they can bring up later on. So it'll be interesting to just see how they do in this postseason and just how that fuels what they do in the offseason in terms of some of these players and who gets moved and who stays.
Well, at the same time, you got to hope they don't like accelerate the process, because like when they won in 2013, that was unexpected. So that kind of like sped up the timeline a little bit because they were kind of in the middle of the rebuild.
Yeah,
So I mean,
exactly.
yeah. So you just hope that like their plans don't get kind of screwed up a little bit because like they think their window is closer than it actually is.
Yeah, that's a very valid point because I mean, they won in 2013 and then that backfired on them because they struggled. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so that's what we don't want to happen. And so I think you're exactly right with that. I think that they have to just keep taking things and approaching things in a smart way, which I think Bloom has done overall so far and has done a really good job of looking at the big picture and not just the right now, the present. And as long as he continues to do that, then I think that this team will be in good shape. And I think he has to continue to do that regardless of how they perform in this postseason.
Right. I'm a big Bloom guy in
Oh, me
general,
too.
so
I love Bloom. I think he's great. A lot of people were crapping on him for the decisions that he's made this year. And at the trade deadline, he was given a really hard time. But I said, well, what was he supposed to do? I mean, he was never going to outbid teams like the Dodgers and Padres for Max Scherzer. I mean, come on. Like, people have to be realistic. And you don't want to give up your whole farm system to get somebody that may help you win a World Series when your team might not be quite there yet to be at the point where they can win a World Series, and you don't want to deplete your entire farm system for that. So, and obviously he did enough at the trade deadline because look where they're at now, so all those people are pretty quiet now, but I really like him. I think his approach is good, and I think he's really invested in the future. And I mean, look what he did for the Rays. I mean, now the Rays are a good team that's going to be good for a while because he built up a lot of prospects in their system. And I think that's what he's trying to do here. He's not we're going to go all in and dish everybody out so we can win now after Dombrowski, because that is what happened, so that they could win a World Series, and they gave up a lot of their top-notch talent that was in the system. So I think he's doing a good job of focusing on, we want to be good every year and we want to focus on our future too. And I really like that about him.
yeah, that's exactly right. Like his motto is basically about like the future and the present, like you said, like staying competitive in the now, but also reinsuring that you can be competitive in the future as well. So he seems to know what he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I'm happy about. I think our future is really bright. And even if we lose in the ALDS this year, there should be no shame in what happened this season at all, because this team did far better than anybody thought they would. And so I think it's been a really cool season regardless. Obviously, I hope they win, but if they don't win, I'll be disappointed, of course, because I always want them to win, but I'll look back on the season and say it was a success regardless of what happens in this series. And I think that's a really good feeling. So I'm excited. It's going to be a fun series. I think it's going to be just the rest of the playoffs in general are going to be fun to see who comes out of it. But I really appreciate you joining me on the show. This was fantastic. I think you do a really good job. Everybody check out his content and follow him. He writes for a couple different baseball sites and has a Red Sox podcast, which we talked about at the beginning. So everyone check out his content. Definitely super knowledgeable about baseball and the Red Sox. And as always, thank you for tuning into the show. I hope everyone enjoys the game tonight, and obviously go Red Sox. And I will talk to you all next time. Have a good day, everybody.